what is the point of celery without the sour cream and onion dip, you know? Isn't that what the scoop part is for?
Not even the most trivial matter escapes your inquiring mind, does it, Detective?
You're absolutely right. No luck.
Welcome back, friends.
Welcome back. We're finally back. We're still a little extra sultry.
It's been a couple weeks.
We're always extra salty, but we're a little extra sultry today still. We're recovering from the plague.
Whatever cold it was that
knocked us on our ass.
Gave me and our daughter a sinus infection. And
oh, God, it was the worst. So sorry we missed an episode last week, but as everyone keeps telling me, how the fuck do you put out 3 episodes a week? I don't know. We just do. But we didn't last week, and I'm so sorry.
What, like it's hard?
What, like it's hard? I don't know. I don't have any chill. I, like Nick, have zero chill. So
I was on a work trip last week.
It was really hard for me to admit that we weren't going to make it. I really tried. And then I was like, oh, I'm just going to have to call this. You can't even understand us in real life. You're not going to understand us on a microphone.
Right, but I was on a work trip last week, and I told Ray I was just talking a lot, because I talk a lot.
Yeah.
But I realized on the way home, I didn't quite realize how much Rachel and I don't just sit still.
Right.
Whenever we get a little bit bored, project ideas come up.
Yeah.
And then we have to get up and go do something.
Yeah. Well, a rolling stone gathers no moss. So.
And Rachel has no moss.
Ain't no moss on me. All right. So we're going to do an episode, a Forever Night episode. Season 2, Episode 2, A Fate Worse Than Death. What do we think this title means in the context of the whole episode? Sometimes they're obvious, and sometimes it's like, what are we talking about here?
Looking back on this episode and thinking, what does a fate worse than death mean in the context of this episode? Maybe it's worse to betray your people.
Or is it a glimpse at the fact that Janette may regret some of her choices?
Oh, well, yeah. We definitely go into Janette's backstory.
Yes.
And we get a lot more emphasis on Janette this episode.
Right. And I was thinking, I think we've kind of set aside our lust energy here between Nick and Janette. But what we get in exchange is a far deeper Janette character.
Right.
And a far more mature relationship between the two characters. Because last season, we were free. We had no LaCroix. For the first time in 1,000 years, Janette had no master.
Right.
And neither did Nick. And now
maybe
he's back.
Maybe the reason everything's toned down between Nick and Janette is because LaCroix is back. And when LaCroix was out of range of their vampire GPS, they were just always going for each other.
Yeah. Yeah, they were finally free. It's like you're finally set free after literally 1,000 years.
Okay, so how about this for a fate worse than death?
Okay.
Having to live with yourself after you've made regretful decisions.
Yeah. That's a good one too.
And so that would apply to Janette realizing that, maybe I did some things that I shouldn't have. But then also the antagonist in this episode.
Yeah.
She doesn't get killed.
Right.
And she doesn't get to escape scot-free. She has to go to jail and realize that she killed her friend.
Yeah. Yeah, and this whole episode centers around sex work and a little bit sex work as metaphor for vampirism and sex work as metaphor for being a vampire with an overbearing master,
Right.
overbearing father figure.
Which is particularly apt right now because LaCroix is back.
He just came back. This is our
And-
second episode with
Right.
him. Yeah.
And from Jeanette's perspective, like she gave up, she escaped from the sex work and pimps, but LaCroix is kind of her pimp.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of,
That's the analogy.
we're working with some
they're
heavy
going for.
metaphors this entire episode. And because it centers around sex work, and because the language around sex work was so different in the 90s, I should have kept a tally of how many times we used the word hooker.
Yeah.
Because we are throwing that word around like it's beads at Mardi Gras. I mean, they are tossing hooker out every third or fourth sentence. And I have to say, this was challenging for me to listen to because sex work is such a complicated topic and such a nuanced thing to navigate. And in the 90s, it wasn't given the same grace and the same thoughtfulness that I think we try to give it now in 2023. But we just have to put on our context lenses and remember that the conversations surrounding sex work in the 90s were very, very different. It was 30 years ago. The 90s is as far away from today as the 60s was from the 90s. So, yes, it's challenging to listen to, but they are trying to tackle some they're trying to have a conversation about it. Often the show is trying to prompt questions. It's trying to use narrative to discuss problems that are otherwise difficult to discuss. They are discussing it in a way somebody in the 90s on cocaine writing a script might discuss it, but they are trying to do it. And that's what we're kind of trying to do here as well. And kind of like Star Trek used space travel as a metaphor for society, we're using vampirism as a metaphor for sex work. Okay, that's fine. So we just kind of accept that, and then we'll move on through the episode with that in mind. Because we open with a sex worker, and she's in a hotel room, primping, getting ready, and we're cutting between her and a guy walking down the hallway, and he looks super jazzed that he's about to go meet this woman in this hotel room. And she actually calls out, "Are you ready?" even though he's not there yet. And then she turns, and we do our classic, you just see the muzzle of the gun. You don't see who's holding it.
Right.
And she gets shot. And then our guy arrives, and he does he throws his coat, and he's just...
Oh, yeah, he's lit.
Yeah, he's just came from the bar. He's about to make it with one woman, we assume at this point, and he's super excited about that. And he goes to lay in bed. He puts the phone on his chest. He dials the operator to get some, room service. And then he reaches over and lifts his hand up. It's covered in blood. Because the woman he was hoping to meet is there, but she's not alive anymore. But and that's our crime. That's how we open. Then we go to the intro. And we come back, and it's already a crime scene. And there's approximately 55 people in this small hotel
Tromping
room.
around.
Milling
picking
about.
stuff up.
They are wearing gloves. Nick is rummaging through this woman's purse very elaborately.
Yeah.
But he is wearing gloves. So
Okay. I
hey,
guess that's an
you know what?
improvement.
That's great. And Skanky is eating an apple. He's eating this entire episode. We have some sort of random subplot going on where Skanky is on a diet and then he ditches the diet. And then he's talking about how he's on a new diet, and the new diet is called I Get to Eat Whatever I Want. But he gives us our first seemingly insensitive 90s commentary on what's happening.
Which is his purpose in the show.
Yeah, because Nick is clearly actually investigating this. He's trying to figure out what the woman's name is. He's trying to figure out what's going on. And Skanky's like, yeah. Dead hooker, posh hotel. No one saw anything. What is it, Wednesday? Like, this is what happens all the time. I don't know why we're
Right.
bothering to put some effort into this. We're not going to figure it out because no one's going to fess up. And Nick's like, well, her name was Julie Beamer.
Right.
Maybe we could stop calling her the H word for like 5 seconds, Skanky. No, he's not going to. Sorry, that's not going to happen. And they talked to the guy who came up, and his name is, I forget, something Draper. Barry Draper, I think.
He's the John.
He's the John. Yeah. And he's like, I don't know. I met a guy in the bar. I gave him $300. He gave me a room key. I came up here. I don't know what to tell you. And they're like, look, you're not a suspect because everybody saw you coming up here. Like, everybody knows you weren't in this room when she died.
And in contrast to Skanky's previous insensitivity and jadedness about investigating this kind of crime, he was paying attention to that number.
Yeah.
Because later on,
He knows
he's
it.
like, wait, 300?
Oh, snap.
Oh,
Yeah.
clinch.
Yeah. That's why I like season 2 Skanky, because we get a little bit of he goes from being, I'm an insensitive womanizer who's jaded and over my job, to I'm a goofy dad character who's paying way more attention than you think I am.
And he's performatively jaded.
Yeah, performatively jaded. And that it's like, oh, okay, well, we're going to investigate it, but I just want you guys to know that this is not like a new thing.
That's kind of how he plays with the role of his job, so that probably he can, joke and tease about it, about the I guess plausible stereotypes, so that he can get through the actual trauma of having to be exposed to this kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, day after day after day, and then go home to your wife and your kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to play with it. You have to be able to use humor to lighten the mood, just to be able to have an actual conversation about this.
Right. And Nick finds raven matches in the lady's purse. He pulls out this matchbook, and it's got the raven on the cover. And he's like,
oh, I've never seen these before.
oh, Janette. And so we immediately cut to the raven. And Janette's at the raven, and he's talking to her about it. Well, first she's lighting matches.
Right.
Yeah.
We use the match book as a transition piece.
Right. So she's just sitting at the bar lighting matches and blowing them out because Janette.
For our recurring bartender,
Miklos. Yeah. He appears like twice. He's just like Grace. He appears in a couple episodes. And then...
He was in episode 1.
Was he?
I remember the name Miklos.
Oh.
And her,
I don't know. There's a big debate.
Affected pronunciation of it.
Why there's a debate, I don't know. It's because we got so little content that we just have to pick it apart like a sparse meat on the bone kind of thing about whether or not Miklos was supposed to be a vampire. And the lady who wrote these couple of episodes was like, I don't know. I just felt like we needed a recurring bartender character.
Yeah, and I like it. It adds a little more permanence.
Yeah, like the Raven's a
to
real
the
place.
Raven. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And Janette.
It's a real place with real people.
I know. And Janette is fabulous this entire episode.
She gets a couple really good outfits in here.
We can just say Janette is fabulous, full stop. Just full stop. It's fine. Yeah. I don't love her hair. She's wearing like a hairband. She's going for like a Roman hairband bun combination here, which isn't like her best hairstyle. Mm-hmm. But I think I've mentioned that season 1, they knew what to do with her hair. And in season 2, they absolutely fucking didn't. And it doesn't really take away from Janette as a whole. It's just there were questionable hair choices made for Janette. This curl perm that she has for most of it is difficult. I prefer her bob, but I mean, that's just personal, a little personal choice. The cool thing about this episode is we're going to get her backstory. We're actually going to get some Janette flashbacks because we go and Nick is trying to talk to her about sex workers because she does provide like a shelter for them. And he's like, well, that's uncharacteristic. Like, I thought you fucking hated humans. And she's like, well, they're my kind. We're all ladies of the night. And he's like, well, no, I mean, it's fine. Like, I'm not judging you. I'm just pointing out the potential hypocrisy in your statement.
It's more, there's a little bit of contrast in how you deal with this group of people versus literally everyone else.
Literally
like every other
else.
human.
Yeah.
And a little bit of, I'm proud of you for showing some compassion.
Like, oh, I didn't know you did that, Janette. Yeah. Oh my God.
High
That's
five,
so
girl.
High five. Oh my God. Like, if I'd known, I wouldn't have been so cynical about your overall outlook on humanity. And she's like, well, I'm not talking about humanity. I'm talking about, like, my people, like sex
Right.
workers, like the people, because Janette immediately goes into a flashback and we find out that she started out as a sex worker. That's what she was when LaCroix found her. And we don't get a lot of, like, plot sort of in the background, but we're really just finding out how she became what she is. And unlike Nick, who turned into a vampire for unknown reasons.
I would say there was zero mystery about the particular lure
Janette.
that
Right,
brought Nick over.
But I mean, Janette had a philosophical reason. She had a life reason, right? She
Right.
wanted to be able
She
to be
needed-
strong enough.
She chose it
Yeah.
as a way to escape, to become something different than
Yeah.
she was, something that wasn't vulnerable to the same kind of influences that kept her trapped
Right.
there.
Yeah. She wanted to be strong enough to have control over her own life,
Right.
which is ironic because LaCroix doesn't give them control over shit. The only thing you get is what I give you, is literally what LaCroix said.
Right.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, LaCroix goes off and they get some freedom. And I think they realize it gives them that maybe it's intentional on LaCroix's part that he leaves every once in a while and gives Nick and Janette some space, so that way when he comes back, they're aware of the contrast of how much influence LaCroix actually has over them. That, you know, when he's around for like 100 years, they kind of get used to it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh, now you're a little bit broken in. Like, you're used to me being here. Like, you're not fighting me. Like, I want spirited people around me as my family. I'm gonna go give you some space, so then when I come back, you'll be aware of how much I'm constraining you, and you'll be fighting me."
Right.
And I'll be able to see that fire in your eyes, and
I'll get to break you all over again.
he
So
gets the
excited.
satisfaction of having this much power over these,
Yeah.
spirited people.
Right. I mean, we see Janette as a human. We start out with her as a human, and she's talking to her friend who's pregnant, and they are sex workers.
Friend and coworker.
Friend and coworker, yes, in Paris, and her friend is pregnant, which is a mortal sin. Like, oh no, how did that happen? I have sex with multiple men every night involuntarily.
Well, she explains that her husband kicked her out because she couldn't
have
conceive a
kid.
child,
Yeah.
and now her pimp is going to kill her because she
Conceived a child.
did
Yeah.
conceive a child.
And Janette's just mad. And this whole flashback is set up beautifully, as usual, except Janette's questionable hair choice, which is voluminous. Let's put it that way. Voluminous. I don't know why they went with that, but that's fine. And everybody is great. LaCroix actually gets this pretty banging outfit.
Yes,
He looks,
I would say.
I was like,
LaCroix's
oh,
outfits,
Nigel. Oh,
I was
my
surprised
God.
a couple times. Like,
yeah.
ooh.
Ooh, my God, you look so good. And then her pimp walks in, and he looks like he walked off the set of a Beatles mockumentary.
Everything looks good up until like mid cheek.
Yeah.
And then the horrible wig starts.
It looks like somebody bought a Beatles wig at Spirit Halloween and tried to alter it to make it look period specific, but it just looks like a bad Beatles wig.
I wonder if they were supposed to use like this guy's natural hair, but then he showed up for filming with like a mohawk, and we're like, dude, we can't use a mohawk. I can't do anything with that.
What do you want me to do with this?
What the heck, man?
Yeah.
And just grab that wig off the shelf.
I don't know if
I don't have time for this.
Somebody get me a wig. Go to Dollar General. Find whatever you could find. I don't know. Bring it back. It's fine. It's like the mullet wig. Why? Who was in charge of the hairstyles? Who was the hairstylist? I demand to know. Because questionable hair choices are made for everybody except Skanky and LaCroix, and they are both largely bald. So questionable hair choices could not be made. I guess they could have given them a wig. But still, I just, anyway, moving on from the hair question, but I still want to know. Jeanette gets a really kind of a poignant line, which sort of sets up our theme for the episode, because she's talking to her friend, and her friend is like, I wish I could have just stayed married. If I'd known I could get pregnant, I could have just stayed married. And she's like, well, then you'd be laying down for one man instead of 5. If it's not one master, it's another.
Sooner, I'd still be married and living in England instead of a prostitute in Paris.
So then you would be lying down for one man instead of 20. Is it really better? If it's not one master, it's another. But at least this way we have each other.
Womp womp. That's exactly what Jeanette's going to learn.
And that sums up
for the next 1,000 years.
backstory.
If it's not one master, it's another.
Like, here's her perspective on the world.
I think we're supposed to get a little bit that she's not jazzed LaCroix is back. That they're both a little bit like, well, shit. We almost got free. I mean,
Right.
Janette is copacetic. I mean, there's simpatico, her and LaCroix.
Right.
But
yeah, I think there's a little more personality similarities between Janette and LaCroix.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean she
Or
doesn't
even-
want him to
even
just
just
get the fuck
worldview.
off of her a while.
Of the attractiveness of exploiting people. I think
just reveling in what they are.
right.
Yeah, just being
Right.
what you are. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have as much guilt or shame about what they do to the lowly humans,
Yeah.
right? Whereas Nick sees himself as a member of humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Jeanette's just, he's back, which is like, oh, good. LaCroix is back.
It's like, how are you going to twist my arm to get back at Nick?
Yeah. You know what? It's got to suck too. You were the favorite child. You were chosen. You traveled together for 200 years. You found this random dude in a bar, turned him into a vampire, and he has been the squeaky wheel for 800 years.
Right.
And poor Jeanette's just like, can we leave it? Can we just leave it? Like, I just want to go do fun stuff. Can we just let Nick, let him wallow?
Yeah,
okay?
Nick's a nice guy. Okay, I like him. You know, we've been in love for a long time, but I don't get any of your attention anymore.
I know. Can we go on vacation together? Just you and me. Can we have a LaCroix Janette date? Like for 5 minutes, please.
And not talk about Nick.
Yeah. But after we get through this flashback, Janette, who was initially combative and uncooperative, is feeling more like, okay, fine, I'll help. Like maybe we are on the same side. I remember a time when I felt like you feel. So, okay, fine. And she tells him that Julie's pimp's name is Mason and that he beat her regularly and that she'd given her shelter a couple of times, but she kept going back to Mason probably because it was all she knew, which Jeanette's a little bit talking about herself too. Like maybe you just keep going back because you don't know anything different and you don't know that there's something better because you can't remember what better was like. And she softens and she tells them where Celeste is. And Celeste was Julie's friend / coworker. And she's over at the bar because Janette gives them shelter, gives them a place to come and be. And they can just be themselves and they don't have to feel like anybody's judging them for their line of work. And Skanky walks over and he's like, hey, I'm looking for Celeste. And Celeste's like, sorry, I'm not working right now. And then Nick walks over and she's like, well, I could make an exception.
Which, sorry, Skanky.
Sorry, Skanky. But he is eating again because later they go and they're interrogating Celeste and he's eating like carrots and celery.
Yeah. What's the point of celery without the sour cream?
I know, isn't that what the scoop is for? Because Cohen says, what's with the rabbit food? And he's like, Myra's worried about my cholesterol again. Poor Myra. She's just trying to make Skanky better, but he's off by, he works a high stress job and he clearly eats his feelings.
Yes.
Right. And so he's trying to eat
He's
his
an
feelings.
emotional eater.
But these are not working for him. This was such an odd thing to include, but I love it. This is why I love this show, because they know we're dealing with something pretty heavy here and it's okay to throw in.
This is our C plot.
Yeah,
in
it's
this
okay.
episode.
It's good. I love it. This is the campy but sincereness that I love about shows of this era. Is they didn't need to be Game of Thrones. They didn't need to be House of the Dragon. They didn't need to blow you away with their special effects and their plot lines and their whatever. They were literally competing against like 90210 and a couple other shows. They had the I love sci-fi fantasy crowd. They were going to tune into this show because it was sci-fi fantasy.
Right.
They were
It's
going to be
the
like,
only,
all right, I guess we're watching
fantasy
the
show.
Vampire Cop again. I have talked to, we've had a lot of visitors because it's like family visiting month. And we've been chatting with a lot of them about Forever Night. And they're like, you know what? I think I watched that. I remember what you're talking about. I don't remember anything about the show, but I think I watched that. I'm like, yeah, of course you did. It was like the thing that was on.
Right.
So they just needed to be entertaining. And that's what they are. And that's what this little skanky plot is. It just gives you a chuckle in between all these other heavy things that we're dealing with, is the fact that Skanky is trying to eat his feelings and carrots just are not doing it for him. And also in contrast to some of our earlier episodes, like the first episode, Nick had those shoulder pads that were approximately 18 inches away from his neck on both sides. But in this episode, he gets a little suit jacket, black button up, which looks really nice.
His facial hair is trimmed a little better too.
Yeah, we've neatened up. We've aged him down a little bit because he's not wearing the vest and he's just wearing like a nice black button up, which he looks good in black. I'm always glad when they put him in black. But of course he's not wearing a tie. He never wears a tie. But he's talking to Celeste and she's like, well, yeah, he hit her, but he didn't hit her that hard. Okay, maybe she fell down. Well, I don't know. It's not that bad. Quit looking at me like that. It's just like, I don't know what you want me to say. It's shitty, but here I am. I am what I am.
I was living on the street. I owe him everything. You can understand.
Oh, I understand, all right. He made you what you are, and now he controls you. Don't do this for him, Celeste.
Which is kind of our secondary theme for the episode, which is, do you have to be what you are, or can you change? If you've made choices that have led you to something that you no longer agree with, you no longer like, do you have to live there and make the best of it? Or can you fight to change? And we're talking a little bit about sex workers that don't want to be sex workers anymore. And we're also talking a little bit about vampires that don't want to be vampires anymore.
Right.
Or maybe
And
don't want to be that kind of a vampire anymore.
Whenever you identify yourself with an identity, a like descriptive identity, you're immediately trapped.
Yeah.
You're immediately trapped, or once you deviate from that a tiny little bit, now you aren't that identity anymore and you don't know who you are.
Right.
So you have to get back in line or
forging
re-identify
ahead,
yourself
yeah.
with something slightly different.
Right. And Nick actually says, so he made you what you are and now he controls you, when he's talking to Celeste about Mason. And you're like, are you talking about Mason? Or are you talking about LaCroix? Maybe a little bit of both. And this is where we get our celery scoop is for French onion dip comment, because he's talking to Cohen. I just love it so much. And they follow her. They let Celeste go because they've got nothing. They can't keep her. And they can't even keep Mason because Mason had an alibi.
Right.
Yeah.
Which only gets more substantiated.
Which we haven't actually captured Mason yet because we're about to follow Celeste, which is my
that's
favorite
right.
thing is when they follow people in a like 1962 Cadillac, of which like less than 10,000 were made.
A green shiny Cadillac.
No one's going to notice this incredibly fucking distinctive car just parked on the side of the road. You're literally going to look over and be like, oh, it's a fucking sweet Cadillac. You're not going to be like, oh, that's a Ford Pinto or whatever.
Right.
There's no way you're going to overlook it. So they're trying to be stealthy.
Right.
They're like,
especially the kind of people that they're like stalking.
Yeah.
Like they're going to look and be like, oh, that's a car of someone with some personality, with some ego issues.
Yeah.
That may be receptive to what I have to offer.
right, this is a potential customer.
Yes.
And they're straight up parked like 15 feet from her.
Right.
They're not even down the road or anything. They drove up and parked right next to her, and they're sitting there with
Like
binoculars.
go down the block. It's like you're 20 feet away with like 5x zoom binoculars.
Yeah, I know. You might as well just have a camera lens and stick it out the window and be taking pictures of them. The only reason they're not is because it's snowing. And they don't want to keep the window down because it looks fucking cold. It
Yes.
looks so cold. And these poor actors are out there in these mini skirts. They must be fucking freezing. But she makes them, obviously. Celeste comes over and she's like, oh, hey, guys. Oh, you liked me so much you followed me here, huh? You open for business? I'm open for business. And they're like, no, we're just following you. And she's like, oh, yeah, I knew that. So why don't you guys, have a good night. See you later. And she leaves. And Skanky's like, ah, dang it, I think she made us. And he turns back around and Nick is just gone. Nick has taken this opportunity to whoosh out of the car because you know what's even less conspicuous than a 1962 teal green Cadillac parked on the side of the road is a dude flying and following you and watching you from like fire escape landings up in the wall. Yeah, Nick Vamp follows her because he's invested. Janette is invested, so he's invested.
Right.
He cares about the things that Janette cares about. So he's trying to
he cares about Janette.
he cares about Janette. So he's trying to protect Celeste. I think he'd care anyway, but I don't know that he'd be vampy about it. I don't know that he would use his special set of skills as much as he does because he follows her and he ends up following her where she goes to meet Mason. And as soon as he hears her get slapped, he barges in and arrests Mason. And so Nick is trying to help Celeste they're going to book Mason. They're going to charge him with this crime because they think they've got him on this, that clearly the only person who could have killed Julie is her pimp. And he's like, I could find you somewhere to stay. And she's like, oh, you're going to give me to a social worker? Do you think a social worker is going to help someone like me? And Nick's like, well, I think it's worth trying to get help. I think if you don't want to be doing this, then yes, I'm going to try to help you to get out of this because I know what it's like to be stuck as something or doing something that you don't want to do, but you are like compelled to continue doing because you feel like you don't have a choice.
Right.
And I'm willing to help you with this. And she's like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then they actually she's like, I think I'm making the right choices here. Like I have a fur coat. I live the good life. And he's like, yeah, you're at a police station at 4:30 in the morning. Does that sound like the good life? And that's when they find out that Mason has a pretty good alibi and they can't hold him.
Right.
So they've got to let them all go. And Nick is like, you got to live the life you've got, but that doesn't mean you can't change it. And it's like, oh, Nick, this isn't you. You know that, right? Like,
right.
This is Celeste. He's trying to use his personal experience to be able to relate to her. But
right.
He can't say, I'm relating to you because I have a similar set of experiences.
Right. I'm sympathizing, not empathizing.
Right. Because he can't explain that. She just sounds like a dude trying to tell her what to do.
Right. He's a middle-class white dude in a position of authority.
With lots of money.
Telling her.
Who never appears to have struggled.
Right.
Trying to tell her,
Trying to identify with the...
Yeah. And she's like, oh,
sex worker.
Yeah, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I don't want to discuss this with you because we don't have common ground.
Right.
So please just stop judging me for being what I am. Stop assuming anything about me because you don't know me and you are not me.
He's actually sympathizing with her, but from her perspective, there's no way he could.
Yeah.
And it just comes off as
didactic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Celeste goes to the Raven. She leaves the police precinct. She goes straight to the Raven, and Mason finds her there like immediately. And Janette is like, GTFO, Mason, or I will literally tear your throat out with my teeth.
But my sense here is Janette is doing her best to offer an escape route for Celeste.
Yeah.
Without violating Celeste's agency.
Right, without actively interfering in a way that would force Celeste into a decision that maybe she wouldn't have made otherwise.
Well, even just like, no, Celeste, like, I'm going to hypnotize you into staying here tonight.
Right, yeah.
And I'm going to hypnotize
Mason
into leaving.
Yeah.
So that, because I'm not going to, she could exert her influence over the two of them with the intention of protecting Celeste. But that would be violating Celeste's agency to actually choose this if she really actually wanted it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she literally only uses hypnotism to get Mason to stay in place for a second so she can have a conversation, like a private conversation with Celeste. And she tells her it's not about what you are, it's about who you want to be. And Celeste's like, I know who I am. I am who I want to be.
right. And so she's doing the same thing to Celeste that Nick was doing,
Yeah.
where Nick is like, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to give you an out, but I'm not going to make you do anything.
Right. I'm just trying to tell you, I know where you are and it fucking sucks and I'm here if you need me. And she literally says, look, you can still see the light. You just have to keep swimming. Like the only time you actually start to drown is when you give up and stop swimming. And Celeste is like, yeah, unless you learn to breathe the water.
Celeste, they say that when you're drowning, you can still see the light above you until you stop swimming. Or you learn how to breathe underwater, and you don't remember how to breathe the air. I don't belong up there.
Which is bullshitting yourself.
Yeah. Because you can't breathe water.
Right.
That's still drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just accepting the fact that you're drowning. And Janette's like, well, I tried. I mean, she really doesn't want to do anything. She doesn't want to take away this girl's choice. Because leaving her the dignity of making a bad decision, which is important. If you have the dignity of choice, you also have the right to make the wrong decision. And that's what Janette feels Celeste is doing, but she can't do anything about it.
She can't do anything about it without compromising herself.
Right.
Without compromising her morals.
But she does go see Nick about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, I was impressed with how, I don't know, sophisticated or mature both Nick and Janette were about this.
Yeah.
Where they weren't so pushy.
Right.
With Celeste.
Yeah. And they're just kind of like venting to each other about it a little bit because she shows up at Nick's apartment and Nick's dressing gown has made a glorious reappearance. What is the point of a dressing gown? Because he's still wearing his suit pants and black button-up shirt. He just has his like dressing gown on top of it, like tightly belted around the waist. Is he chilly?
Maybe looks nice, but then also like you don't have to touch your regular clothes. When you
like an apron.
When you put your hands on, like rest your hands on yourself. Now it's this like velvety soft fabric.
Maybe it's like we're supposed to be seeing that Nick is at his leisure. That this is he's off duty.
It's a way of expressing.
That
he's settled in.
Yeah, he's at home and he's getting ready to just like chill for the day. And Janette shows up in her like leather cape outfit, which we're going to see this leather cape several times.
I've had to truck through a little bit of sunlight outfit.
Yeah, this cape must have fucking weighed 50 pounds. It is leather and it is like down to her knees. Mm-hmm. And she's yelling at him. She's like, well, why'd you let Mason go? And he's like, well, because Mason didn't do it. Like Mason had a good alibi. I had to let him go.
Right, I
she's
couldn't
like,
hold him.
She's like, excuse me. I don't care if he did it or didn't do it. Like you compromised the people that he hurts by letting him go. And
is this where she said the line, there's a difference between not guilty and innocent?
Not quite yet. But yeah, She's like, you're old enough to know the difference between not guilty and innocent. And Nick is like, look, I operate under the confines of the job that I have chosen. And I have to abide by the rules that I have decided to accept as my moral code. And I can't just go and kill people because I think that they're guilty of something that undermines everything that I'm trying to do here. And she actually says, who am I talking to right now? Nicola or Detective Knight?
Take care of it.
I haven't seen you like this before, not in 800 years. What is it?
Who's asking? Is it Nicola or Detective Knight?
I am.
You, of all people, should know what her life is like. Trapped in a world of darkness, with no way out. No escape from the hold of the master over her.
Ooh.
And Nick is like, They're both the same thing. Like it's a
Or, yeah,
distinction
who's-
without difference.
It's who's asking me to do this, Nicola or Detective Knight? And he just looks at her and says, "I am."
I am. Me. Fucking me. Nicola and Detective
Stop
Knight
confusing me with these identities that I
have.
portray.
Yeah. I am myself with you, Janette, and I'm myself right now. And I'm telling you, you just have to let these things happen. Like, these are humans. We don't get to be God in their lives. We can't just kill. We can't commit the hypocrisy of killing the guilty. We just had a whole episode about that. Don't you remember the part where I told you we are the guilty? And there's no difference between guilty and innocent blood. And we have to outsource that shit. Like, they have laws and rules and regulations for a reason. And eventually, he's a bad dude. Bad things are going to happen to him. We don't need to be the bad things that happen to him. And I'm not going to. I'm not going to go against this moral code that I have accepted just because you're peeved that this dude got out and is hurting women. Like, I'm mad too, okay? But this isn't how we get him. We're working on it, okay? And she's angry. She's like, well, that you're not who I thought you were. And he's like, I am who you thought I am. You just don't understand what it means to be me. You don't understand what it means to live within the structure of society, because Janette has rejected that structure. So don't presume to know what I'm trying to do for you right now. Just trust that I am working for it. We have the same goal. We just have different means of getting there. And so we get a flashback because Janette's so traumatized by this conversation.
Right, she drifts off.
That it flings her back into the past. And it's her fighting for her life. She was running and trying to get help, but because of who she is and because of what she does, no one's willing to help her because she's less than human.
Right.
And LaCroix shows up and kills the guy who's trying to rape her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nigel Bennett looks really good in this moment. He turned around and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, season 1 LaCroix, I love, right? But our stylish choices for him were weird. We dyed his eyebrows dark, and then he had super ice blonde hair.
Right, he had like the ice blonde hair that was a little bit too long and like spiked straight up.
And he also gets he's always got this like petulantly amused expression. Like, he knows he's fucking with people's lives and he's like, he got a hard on about it. But when he turns around and looks at Janette, it's a very like affectionate look.
Paternal.
Yeah,
look.
a paternal look, like, oh, we're going to have some good times together.
Like, you good? Like, I just tried to save you. I just want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, okay, you have a nice day. You're welcome. You're so fucking welcome. I mean, he really does. He has this very soft expression, and it makes his face so much like, I don't know. I was just like, oh, okay. This is another one of those episodes that, like, I love season 2, but I don't rewatch this one as much as I rewatch some of the others. And I'm just glad we're going through this together, because it really gives me a chance to just sit down and be like, okay, this was a far deeper episode than I was giving it credit for, because we are layering a lot of themes onto our main plot.
Right.
And the fact that I don't think LaCroix sees himself as the overbearing, like, pimp, effectively.
No, absolutely not.
That he is. I think he sees himself as their parent, as their protector and their guide and their leader. And I think he takes his responsibility as somebody's sire very seriously, especially when it comes to Janette and Nicholas, because they are kind of his chosen family. Whether or not they chose him as their family.
He has turned a lot of vampires. We keep running into vampires that LaCroix has made.
Yeah.
But he doesn't like follow them around and check up on them and
in the same way.
Try to give them life advice and guidance and like all this stuff that he does for Janette and Nick.
Yeah. Because they're his chosen two. They are a family in his eyes.
Right.
And he's always trying to be the dad to Nick that he thinks Nick needs. And we get that moment of like, paternal facial expression when he turns around and looks at Janette as she's running away because he just saved her. And in his mind, he's about to save her for good.
Right.
Because he's about to give her the ability to save herself.
Right.
And we go back to the present. And Nick has been affected by Janette's speech far more than we realize, because he's yelling at Skanky about how they need to get Mason. They need to figure he's guilty. We just need to figure out how he's guilty. We need to make something.
Right. We need
up,
to get
basically.
something on him.
We got to get something on him. And Skanky's like, whoa, 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 dude, don't make this about you. This isn't about you.
I thought we settled this yesterday. We got nothing on the guy.
Then we'll get some.
You're wasting your time. She's been living that life. She doesn't know how to function in the normal world.
What are you saying, Skanky? She screwed up. Okay, so you just write her off. No second chances.
Whoa, do not take this personally. You know, every cop gets involved every now and then. It's happened to me.
Which is really perceptive of Skanky to immediately be like, are we fucking talking about Mason or are we talking about you right now? My benevolent supernatural creature of some description that seems to have attached themselves to me and won't leave me alone, because I literally left my precinct and you followed me and I'm just trying to make the best of it, okay? And then we go to Natalie, and Nick is talking to Natalie about Skanky, and he's literally like, you know what, maybe Skanky was right. And Natalie goes, well, there's a concept.
She's trying to highlight to Nick that it is significant that Nick is saying maybe Skanky was right.
Right. She gets some pretty pithy, kind of snarky, insightful lines. She gets some personality-full lines. She's not just there to provide information. Like, all right, the dead guy died of this, this, and this. For Nick to go, oh my God, and run out of the room. She actually gets some, like, I am your guide. I am your human guide right now moments in this episode, which I think carries through season 2, where she doesn't necessarily get to be the developed character I would have loved to see her as, but she gets to be less of the, I'm literally only here to plausibly provide you with this information so that we can move forward in the episode. And we go to the Raven, because Nick is like, well, you know what? I'm going to go talk to Janette about this. I'm conflicted. I don't like how we left it. I'm going to go talk to her. And so he goes to the Raven and she's missing. And Miklos is like, hey, you want a drink? You can have a drink while you wait. And he's like, you know where she is and you're trying to stall me. So I'm out. And so he probably uses his vampire GPS to go find Janette. But he finds her at Mason's. And Mason is dead, and Janette turns around and hisses at the camera. And of course, this is our commercial break cliffhanger. We think maybe Janette killed Mason, but when we come back, we find out, oh no, Mason was shot in the same way that Julie was shot.
With the same caliber gun.
Yeah, and Janette just was in there. It was a wrong place, wrong time kind of moment.
Right.
And she's got this cute little messy bun.
Mm-hmm.
With the curls hanging down. I was like, oh, this is a really sweet little hairstyle. This one's not bad. It really does look like she was like, look, I don't have time to primp. I just got to go murder a man. Then I'll come home and do my full face. Mm-hmm. It looks really cute. I like when Janette's extra, and I love when she's extra. But I also love when we're like, oh, she's a person too, which we get a lot in this episode. Like, she's not just an appliance that lives at the bar and wears cute dresses. She's also a person.
Gives information to Nick when he needs it.
Yeah, a lot of the women exist simply to provide Nick with the information required to move the episode forward.
Like most shows, I don't know the name of the like archetype or trope of this character where the main character is like stuck on something. They need like this one breakthrough, like revelation or piece of like the key piece of information or whatever. And so they go to this person and they're just kind of venting like, oh, I'm stuck on this and I don't know where to go from here. I'm lost or whatever. And then they're just like, oh, well, here, have a drink. And like, here's an anecdote from my life or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
snap, that has put all the pieces in place and now I know
you're
what to
a genius.
Do. Yeah.
Boom, and disappear.
We can call it Linda because that's Dr. Linda's entire purpose in the Lucifer television show.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But this time when Skanky shows up, he's eating a donut. And Nick's like, oh, a donut, huh? And he's like, yeah, I decided, fuck it. Cholesterol's going to happen to me. I might as well just enjoy the ride. So he's eating a donut. And they talk to a vice cop, Goodman, the vice cop. And there's a moment where the guy is like, you're looking at you're looking at the downtown version of mergers and acquisitions. Like literally they just murder each other and then they combine their stable of assets. In this case, they're women. And he's like, look, this looks real dramatic, but somebody like another snake's head's going to rear up and it'll be fine because these women are like pilot fish. They just follow whoever is their leader. And Nick actually has to hold Janette back.
Yeah.
Because Jeanette's like, oh, I'm going to fucking kill him. And Nick's like, nope, not right now. Hold it together, Janette. Because they're in a room full of police officers. This is not the moment for Janette to be like, pilot fish, huh? Say that to my fucking face. And I love how Natalie's like, oh, don't you need to go, Nick? And this is really like, this is why Janette can't go downtown and answer questions because it's almost dawn. So Natalie is there to give us a timestamp, which is helpful because then they're like, well, we need to take her downtown, ask her questions, give her a polygraph. Like she was here, she discovered the body. Don't we need to know anything about this woman? And even Skanky is like, no, she's a friend of Nick's. Skanky doesn't know why they're trying to get Janette out of there without actually having to answer questions, but
Right.
He's immediately there for them, for Natalie
Backing
and Nick.
them up.
He's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. She's Nick's friends. We don't need to. Well, we know where to find her if we need to ask her any more questions. And Goodman's like, what? That's not
No,
how
this is procedure.
this is literally how it's done. Like this woman discovered a body. She's a person of interest. We need to take her back and question her. And Nick's like, no, we don't. And so he ends up hypnotizing him. And he's like, you don't need to see her
She's not a
identification.
suspect.
She's not a suspect. And then he's like, oh, and while you're at it, he gives them an instruction about like, can you go
Find
find Celeste? And Natalie's like, I wish I could do that.
You're going to have to show me how you do that someday.
Because Nick's like, all right, well, we're done. Now we can go. And so they leave. And this is when we get the line about, you are old enough to know the difference between not guilty and innocent.
This way it keeps us from choosing the wrong side. We didn't have any evidence on him because he didn't do it.
Oh, please. You're old enough now to know the difference between not guilty and innocent.
Because she's like, well, Mason deserved to die anyway. And Nick's like, no, he was innocent. And she's like, he wasn't innocent. He was just not guilty.
He was not guilty of murdering Julie.
Yeah, this particular crime.
But he's not an innocent person.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, like, you should know better because she's just going to belong to somebody else.
That child. Someone had to free her.
This didn't free her. She'll just belong to someone else, that's all.
Kind of like you.
And Jeanette's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we immediately go into a flashback. And it's the flashback where LaCroix turns Janette into a vampire. And it's like, yes, you get to be free of your human dude now. But
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Into the LaCroix fire. Yeah. Which, again, I don't think LaCroix thinks that way.
No.
I think it's more like they are real because they had that little bit of freedom where there was not even the threat that LaCroix was going to come back.
Right. And they believed that he was dead.
Yeah, that they were free forever.
Right.
And now it's like, well, shit. We're not. But they go back out to question some people on the street because now they've got nothing. Mason's dead. Julie is dead. Celeste is missing. And they have absolutely no fucking clue who killed any of these people. Because the obvious answer doesn't seem so obvious right now. Because they're still thinking of Celeste as the victim in all of this.
Right.
And they go and parked on the street, kind of having a conversation. And one of the sex workers walks up to the window. And she's like, oh, 2 dudes, huh? Well, there's 2 of us. We'll give you the same deal that Julie and Celeste used to give, $300. And they're like, $300 for the 2 of you?
And that's why
And she's
Skanky's like, wait,
oh,
$300?
And he goes, $300 for the 2 of you? And the lady's like, all right, fine, $250. And she goes, wait, are you cops? And they're like, yeah, we're cops. She goes, $200, professional courtesy. And Nick is like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And Skanky goes, yeah, I think Barry Draper was holding out on us because they both immediately get it. Because I love the Skanky upgrade. the Skanky glow up for this season, which is Skanky is far more on the ball than he appears to be. Part of his, like, I'm eating a donut and, complaining about celery is a smokescreen.
Right.
Yeah. So they go back and question Draper, and he confirms he paid $300 for 2 women, not one.
So there should have been 2 women in the apartment.
Right.
Or in the hotel room, not just the one that they found dead.
Yeah.
So now we have some information about who else was in the apartment that could have been holding the gun.
Right. And because we've been framing Celeste as a victim this entire time, they don't immediately think, oh, well, the only other person in the hotel room was Celeste. So Celeste might be the murderer.
They think Celeste is our witness.
Yeah, Celeste
to the
saw
third person that was in the room.
Whoever killed.
With the gun.
Which, this is to their credit. We've been throwing the H word around a lot. We've been heavy on some sex worker stereotypes. But the fact that they aren't immediately vilifying every sex worker in this episode is refreshing. For the 90s, this was pretty progressive. And in the meantime, Goodman has found Celeste, and she's at a hotel. And he's trying to give her like a pep talk, like everybody has been doing so far. And she's like, oh, yeah, vice cop with a heart of gold. And he's like, no, just a cop with a daughter about your age. And she's like, yeah, that's real, real nice. Pew, 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 pew. And she shoots him. She shoots him. And then she dips. And she runs to Janette at the Raven and is pretending to be upset because she's still pretending to be the victim. And Nick and Skanky find Goodman at the hotel. And they're immediately like, oh, dang, whoever killed Julie must have found Celeste here too. And this phantom gunman also killed Goodman, and Celeste must have run or maybe got captured. And now we need to go find her.
But Nick's
like, ho. Goodman didn't even reach for his gun. He didn't feel threatened at all. And they're like, oh, shit. That means it was Celeste. And so they run to the Raven. And we get a little bit more flashback in the meantime. And we find out that Janette killed her pimp. And we get the fun line because LaCroix had told her, people will say that living a good life is the best revenge. But I say living forever is the best revenge. And Janette's like, no. Revenge is the best revenge. Because she kills Ringo. I don't know. Just kills her pimp. And that is the end of the Bad Beatles wig. And we are all the better for it. But in the meantime, Janette's like, look, I remember a time when someone gave me a gift. And I'm going to give you that gift.
Right, to help me escape from the prison. Because
you are drowning. And I'm going to give you something so that even if you do drown, you'll never die. You're going to get out of this, and I'm going to help you. And Nick arrives just in time to keep Janette from turning Celeste into a vampire. And Celeste is like, what the shit? What was just happening? And Janette's like, what are you doing here? This isn't a male space right now. Like, this is a female problem right now. And Janette is wearing this like adorable little tutu low cut dress thing, which is, she wears it a couple of times and it's really, really cute. And there's a part where she's going to get shot by Celeste and Nick jumps in front of her. Nick knows full fucking well that Janette is going to be perfectly fine. The only reason he jumps in front of her is to protect her wardrobe. He's like, not the dress! And he just jumps in front of her.
I really like you in that
dress. I really like that dress because we know Nick has a million more coats. What's a couple holes in this coat? Who cares? It's blousy. If it's moving just right, no one's going to see it.
Right.
If we wear a black shirt underneath, we're perfectly fine. But the dress, because she goes to shoot Janette and he literally hops in front of her. She gets shot a couple of times, but not as many times. You know, it's cheaper to get a couple of bullet holes repaired than it is to get
like six.
Yeah. And then, of course, they call him. Skanky arrives with actual backup because Nick just left him. He's like, I gotta go. And he just left. And Nick's like, or Skanky's like, all right, I'll call for backup. So they show up.
I'll meet you there.
So they show up at the Raven, and Natalie is pulling bullets out of Janette over on this couch. And Nick walks up and she's like, do you have any evidence for me? And
1, 2, 3.
He drops bullets in her hand and she's like, and where did we find these? And he's like, in
the wall behind the bar over
the
there.
wall behind the bar. And she's like, right, wall behind the bar. And so he sits on the couch next to Janette as Natalie's walking away. And he's like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, your friend's an excellent surgeon. Like, it didn't hurt when she took him out. And he's like, I'm not talking about the bullets. And we have this really uncommon moment of solidarity where she's like, do you really think it's worth it trying to be a human?
You really think it's possible, don't you, to start over?
Yes.
I hope you're right,
You do?
if that's what you want. I would have killed to set her free, and I would do no less for you,
You must never do that.
Nicolas.
And this is our first hint that Janette is softening a little bit to the idea of Nick's quest for mortality, because she realizes that maybe she stopped seeing the light because she stopped swimming, not because the light disappeared. And that maybe Nick's not wrong in trying to be a better person.
Right.
Maybe she wants to be
regain some humanity, or how did he phrase it? Finding his soul.
Yeah, because she didn't see Celeste. She saw herself, and she couldn't recognize the deception that Celeste was throwing her way because she was just blinded by her own trauma. And maybe if she had been more in touch with humanity, she would have been more in touch with the fact that Celeste was not the victim, she was the bad guy. And she's kind of feeling morose a little bit. And she actually tells Nick, look, I'm not going to try to be human, but I will kill anyone who tries to stop you from trying to be human. And he's like, I appreciate the sentiment, but please don't do that. And she's like, well, you know what I mean.
Restrain yourself.
And he's like, I do know what you mean. You meant that literally. Please don't kill anybody for me. That's not how I want to go about doing this. And it's really sweet because we spent the whole last season kind of shaming him for what he's trying to do. And we really spent kind of part of the first episode of this season shaming him for the fact that he won't let this human life go. And this is Janette being like, look, I see you. I see you and I accept you. And they get this poignant moment about, look, we both know what it's like to live in captivity.
It's about how we live in captivity. We must escape or die trying. Vampires and humans alike.
And we just have to make the best of it.
Right.
Just like Celeste kind of tried to make the best of it. Yes, she went about it kind of the wrong way, but she was trying to free herself in her own way. And we know all about that.
Well, in the end, we find out she wasn't just trying to free herself. She wasn't just trying to escape.
She was trying to be the
She
the
was
boss.
trying to claim the position and
she-
become the oppressor.
right.
Right.
The hallmark of trauma is
Is the compulsion to perpetuate
that trauma. And that's what she was going for.
Right. And she was so stuck in this mindset that literally for her, the only option that she could imagine that she could follow through on is
becoming the boss.
Yeah. Take it, like, my world only has these two fixed roles.
Yeah.
And I can be one of them, or I can be the other one.
You can be the pilot fish, or you can be the shark.
And there's no third option.
Right. And she's like, well, then I'm a fucking shark. Yeah. And it's a sad way to end the episode because they then like snuggle on the couch, but it's not like
But then Nick and Janette are like, Nick is kind of showing Janette, hey, yeah, Celeste, like you, before you were a vampire, you had this worldview. Celeste had this worldview that there's, two positions you can be in. And I also had that worldview for a while, but Nick is like, Janette, there is a third option.
right. There's not just pilot fish and sharks in the ocean.
Right.
Yeah.
There is another path. And Jeanette's kind of like, okay, I think I will try it out for a little while.
Yeah. I'm not mad at it.
Right.
I'm not like,
And so I think that's
I'm not mad at it.
that's the the moral of this episode.
Yeah, and we actually get some snuggling at the end, which last season would have felt very like fuck me energy.
Yeah.
But this season feels very like
Snuggle me energy.
snuggle me. Yeah, a more mature kind of like a more, you get the sense that they've been together for a very long time. And that it's not always about sexual intimacy. Sometimes it's about emotional intimacy. And so right now, what she needed wasn't physical intimacy. What she needed was a shoulder to lean her head on. Just like a moment.
And some reassurance.
And some reassurance that she's not a bad person. She's
Right.
not
She
bad.
took a risk.
Yeah.
Trying to help Celeste. And then she's like, Nick, I tried it your way and I got burned.
Yeah.
And Nick's like, well,
That happens sometimes.
it happens sometimes, but it's worth it because every once in a while it works.
Yeah. And I think this is a moment of forgiveness too, because we had a heated argument.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is kind of Nick saying, like, I'm proud of you.
And you also get the sense in this episode that Nick's continual striving to be better has left him far more emotionally mature
Yes.
than both Janette and LaCroix,
Right.
where his continuous quest, his continuous striving for something new, even though it has been harder and it has made his life harder, it has made him a far deeper, more compassionate person than they are. And I like that. Because often we have framed him as weaker, that his quest for mortality has made him weaker, has made him less than the
Right.
others.
Because he's not as skilled sometimes in the vampire arts.
Right.
But
And-
that's not where his power is.
Right. That's not where his power lies. It's in his ability to empathize and sympathize and to be compassionate. And I thought
And cooperate.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I liked this episode.
Mhm.
I'm glad we actually sat down and watched this with some family members that are visiting. I was like, sorry guys, we got to watch Forever Night because we got an episode to record. And they were like, oh, okay. And we watched 2 more episodes afterwards.
And they were in it.
They were like, okay, yeah, we can watch the next one. And I'm like, yes, one of us, one of us. In fact, the one was like, is this streaming on Prime? And I'm like, absolutely, it's streaming on Prime, but you'll have to find the 3rd season. And they were like, perfectly fine, not a problem. I can do that. And you will. That about sums it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an Instagram. I haven't been doing very much on the Instagram because, again, hashtag sick, hashtag sick, hashtag sick.
Hashtag April has been crazy.
Hashtag motherfucking April. But hopefully we're back in business. Backstreet's back, but not Backstreet. Strange and Beautiful Book Club is back. We didn't do Hi, I'm Rachel and Hi, I'm Matt. We just rolled right into the episode. Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to Strange and Beautiful Book Club, which has an Instagram and a YouTube video, which again, I haven't been posting every single day like I was trying to because, again, hashtag sick. But I pivoted a little with how I was uploading the episodes to YouTube. So I'm focused on uploading all the Forever Night episodes now. So the Forever Night episodes are coming mostly one a day on the YouTube channel. So if you have anybody who's like, man, I'd love to listen to that, but I don't have any podcast stuff, we're now up on YouTube. It's just a still image with like talkie over top of it. But that's fine. Until I figure out how to do recording for us down here, I'm not really concerned about it. A lot of podcasts do that. So anyway, we have 9 subscribers on YouTube now.
Woohoo.
I know, we're almost in the double digits. We do still have a recommendation form. I need to figure out how to put up a link to it because the website is still broken. I'm a terrible person. Hashtag sick. That's all I can say about that. Hashtag somebody join the Patreon, which we also have, so that we can afford to pay somebody to make a better website. Please. The Patreon is there. We're working on some more Patreon exclusive content. That's going to start getting posted here pretty soon. So if you want to enjoy the full range of what Matt and I offer, the Patreon is the perfect place to do it. There's a $1 tier. What's $1? I always say that, but come on, what's $1? And then there's a $5 tier, which gets you access to the Discord. It's the Night Nights. So if you want to be a Night Night hop on over to our Patreon. I try to put a link to both in all of our show notes. So if you can't find it, look to the show notes. They're there. I'm about to lose my voice, so I think maybe we'll just wrap it up here.
Yeah. So remember, sometimes the strangest things are the most beautiful too.
So be who you are and love what you love. Until next time, friends.
Bye.
Bye.